Snow fell like ash from a white sky, slow and unrelenting, blanketing everything in a thick silence that made the city feel abandoned. Street lamps glowed dimly through the swirling flurries, casting lonely halos over cracked sidewalks and empty benches. The wind carried a sharpness that clawed at the skin, biting through even the thickest of coats. For those with homes, it was a night to stay inside, curled under warm blankets. For those without, it was a night to survive. Beneath the half-collapsed awning of an old bus stop, a man lay curled into himself. His name was Tom, a quiet figure with a heavy coat, torn gloves, and a beard that had grown thick and wild. He had long since stopped, counting how many nights he'd slept outside. Time had become a blur of cold mornings, hungry afternoons, and restless sleep stolen between bouts of noise, danger, and dreams that always faded too quickly. But tonight was different. Tonight was colder than he'd felt in years. His breath came in visible puffs, each one a fleeting cloud that melted into the air. Beneath the thick layers of discarded blankets and ragged clothes, his body shook involuntarily. Next to him, nestled tightly against his chest, was the only warmth he had in the world, Charlie. Charlie wasn't just a dog. He was a scrappy mutt, part shepherd, part who knows what, with a coat too short for the freezing nights and eyes that held a loyalty deeper than any words ever could. He pressed into Tom's chest, his own body trembling, doing what little he could to share his warmth. Tom's hand, wrapped in a fingerless glove, rested over Charlie's back, his thumb stroking the fur in a slow rhythm that kept them both grounded. "We're gonna be all right, boy," Tom whispered, though his voice cracked from the cold. Just one more night. He'd been saying that for weeks, maybe months. Tom remembered warmer days. He used to have a life, an apartment, a job, a future. But life has a way of unraveling fast when the wrong thread gets pulled. A layoff here, a missed rent payment there. Add in a car that broke down and a few weeks of bad luck, and suddenly he found himself slipping between the cracks. Family, estranged, friends, gone one by one like leaves falling from a dying tree. And then there was Charlie. He'd found the dog 2 winters ago, just a pup back then, abandoned in a cardboard box near the back of a gas station. Tom didn't have anything to offer, not even food, but Charlie had followed him anyway, loyal from the start. And somehow, that bond had saved them both. A gust of wind howled down the street, lifting snow off the ground in a swirling dance. Tom huddled lower, shielding Charlie with his arms. The dog whined softly, not from pain, but from sensing Tom's discomfort. He always knew. Footsteps echoed nearby. Tom opened one eye, cautious but too tired to move. A figure passed, head down, bundled in thick clothing, moving quickly. No eye contact, no words. Just another person ignoring the invisible man on the street. That was the worst part, Tom thought. Not the cold, not the hunger, not even the danger. It was the way people stopped seeing you. As if becoming homeless stripped away your humanity. You were no longer someone, just scenery. The snow thickened. Midnight passed. Tom's fingers felt like glass, stiff and brittle. He pressed Charlie closer, drawing on his warmth like a dying ember. Suddenly, Charlie lifted his head, ears perked. His nose twitched. A soft growl rumbled in his throat. "What is it?" Tom rasped. Charlie stood up, shaking the snow off his fur. His body faced the end of the street, his tail rigid. Tom followed his gaze, and at first saw nothing. Then, out of the falling snow, a figure emerged. It was a woman, mid-30s perhaps, bundled in a navy coat, scarf over her mouth. She walked slowly, scanning the street with deliberate steps, a bag slung over her shoulder. She was out of place. Too careful. Too aware. Charlie didn't bark. He just watched. She approached, stopping a few feet from Tom. Her eyes were wary but kind. She crouched down, pulling something from her bag. "Hey," she said gently, her voice muffled through the scarf. "You okay?" Tom didn't answer. He wasn't sure if she was real. "I saw you here last week," she continued. "I brought something." She unzipped a thermos and poured hot soup into a paper cup. The steam curled into the air like smoke from a dream. She offered it, placing it beside Tom. He hesitated. Then, slowly, he reached out, taking the cup with shaking hands. The heat stung his fingers but brought a dull relief. Charlie sniffed at her hand. She smiled and pulled a bag of jerky from her coat, offering it to the dog. Tom tried to speak. "Why?" she shrugged. "You looked like you could use a break." He sipped the soup. It wasn't much, thin broth with a few vegetables, but it tasted like a miracle. "I'm Rachel," she said after a moment. Tom nodded. "Tom. Nice to meet you, Tom." For a minute, they sat in silence. The wind howled again, but somehow it felt less cruel with someone else nearby. "You got anywhere to go?" Rachel asked softly. Tom shook his head. "Shelter's full. Been for days." Rachel frowned. "I know someone running a church kitchen down on 8th. They might let you sleep in the basement. It's not warm, but better than out here." Tom hesitated. He'd heard offers before. Some were real. Others were traps. But Charlie growled lowly, not at Rachel, but at the mention of the shelter. He didn't like enclosed spaces. "I'll check it out," Tom lied. Rachel saw through it, but didn't. "Push!" She stood, brushing snow from her knees. "I'll come back tomorrow. Bring some more soup." Tom nodded. She hesitated a moment longer, then walked away, vanishing into the snow. Charlie lay down again, but he didn't sleep. Neither did Tom. The soup warmed his belly, but the cold was creeping deeper into his bones. As the night dragged on, Tom began to drift. Memories floated in and out. Christmas mornings as a child, his mother's laugh, the smell of cinnamon and pine. Then other memories. Being 23, drunk on a bus, breaking things he couldn't fix, losing touch, losing hope. Charlie licked his face, pulling him back. Tom opened his eyes. "You're still here," he whispered. Charlie wagged his tail once, then rested his head on Tom's chest. Morning came slowly. The snow stopped, but the clouds remained, casting a gray light over the street. Tom sat up, bones aching. The temperature hadn't risen. His joints screamed as he moved. He stood, slowly, and Charlie stretched beside him. "Let's go," he said. "Maybe find somewhere better than a bench tonight." Charlie barked softly and fell, in step beside him. Together they began walking, one man and one dog, footprints trailing behind them in the fresh snow. They passed people in thick coats, heads down, clutching coffee cups, earbuds in. No one looked. No one spoke. But the world had shifted just a little. There was soup in his belly. There was hope, faint but alive. And most importantly, there was Charlie. The coldest night hadn't broken them. Not yet. Not today. Not while they had each other. The day after the coldest night began like all the others, slow, gray, and bitter. The kind of morning where the sky looked bruised, hanging. Low over the city like a ceiling of wet wool. Tom's breath fogged the air in front of him as he and Charlie walked in silence, their boots and paws crunching softly over the snow that crusted the sidewalks. Their first stop was the alley behind the corner cafe. Tom knew the staff there. Switched shifts at 6 a.m., and sometimes, if the younger manager was working, they tossed out bagels that were only a day old. Sure enough, there was a black trash bag tucked behind the dumpster, and Tom's practiced hands dug through it quickly, setting aside 2 bagels, slightly stale but unbitten. He split the first one and gave half to Charlie, who devoured it with enthusiasm, tail wagging. Tom chewed his half slowly, letting the dry bread soften on his tongue before swallowing. It wasn't much, but hunger teaches you gratitude for even the smallest of meals. They wandered from block to block, careful to avoid the areas where police tended to clear out homeless encampments. Winter brought not just cold and hunger, but also suspicion. Property owners didn't want vagrants near their storefronts, even if they weren't doing anything but trying to stay alive. Tom had been chased, harassed, even ticketed. Like poverty was a crime punishable by fines he couldn't pay. Still, they kept walking. Movement meant warmth, even if only a little. As they reached the southern edge of the park near the river, Tom saw the gray clouds shift. The snow had stopped briefly during the morning, but now it threatened to return. The sky darkened again, and the air changed. He could feel it in his lungs. A storm was coming. Storm fronts rolling in, he muttered to Charlie, who was sniffing the base of a light pole. "Gotta find shelter before it hits," Charlie barked once, as if in agreement. Tom had a few places in mind. There was an abandoned factory near the docks, a risky spot because others might already be squatting there. But it had a roof, and if you found the right corner, you could get out of the wind. He also considered an underpass nearby where some other unhoused folks sometimes set up tarps, though it was loud, and the city crews swept it out twice a month. He turned toward the river, heading for the factory. The snow began again, light at first, but heavy enough to hide footprints within minutes. The streets cleared of pedestrians as quickly as if someone had rung a bell. People retreated to their homes, shops pulled in their sidewalk signs, and cars began driving slower, tires skidding occasionally on icy patches. Tom and Charlie trudged on, heads down against the growing wind. By the time they reached the factory, it was already almost whiteout conditions. Snow whirled around them like dry confetti, stinging Tom's cheeks. His beard had tiny icicles clinging to it, and his gloves were wet from brushing Charlie's back. He pushed open the old side door to the warehouse with a groan, the metal frame grinding against ice. Inside, the space was cavernous and dark. Once used for shipping or manufacturing, Tom never figured out which. It had long since been gutted. Broken pallets littered the floor, and old signs hung crookedly from the walls. Some graffiti marked the concrete supports, crude drawings, slogans, tags from gangs long gone. He didn't call out. Better not to disturb anyone. Instead, he moved silently toward the back corner where the ceiling hadn't collapsed, and there were still a few stacked pallets and boxes that made a decent windbreak. Charlie stuck close to his side, ears alert, tail low. He could tell something wasn't right. Then Tom heard it, a cough. He froze, squinting through the shadows. There was someone already there. "Hello," he called quietly. "I don't want trouble. Just trying to get out of the storm." There was a pause, then movement. A figure stepped forward. A man, maybe in his 50s, wearing a long trench coat and holding a rusted metal pipe in one gloved hand. He didn't look threatening, but he didn't look friendly either. "This is my spot," the man said, voice rough. "Been mine since October." Tom raised his hand slightly. "I'm not looking to take it from you. Just need a corner." "Got a dog with me?" The man squinted, eyes flicking down to Charlie, who sat obediently at Tom's heel. "Good dog," the stranger muttered. "Most mutts would have barked." Tom gave a small smile. "He's smart." The man hesitated, then nodded toward a broken shipping crate near the far side. "You can have that end. Just don't come near my side, and I won't come near yours." Deal. Tom guided Charlie over, brushing snow off the crate and laying his tarp over it. It wasn't much, but it was something. The wind outside howled, and the snowstorm intensified. Inside the warehouse, it was cold but still. No wind, no snow on your face. Just shadows, breath, and the quiet sound of two people trying to survive. Tom pulled his blanket tighter and laid down. Charlie curled beside him. A few minutes passed before the other man spoke again. "You a vet?" Tom looked up. "What? You a veteran?" the man repeated. "You got that look." Tom shook his head. No, just life wore me out. The man grunted. Same here. Name's Jasper. Tom. More silence. Then Jasper asked, What's the dog's name? Charlie. He's a good one. He's everything, Tom replied quietly. The storm raged on into night. Snow piled higher against the outer doors, and wind whistled through cracks in the corrugated metal. But inside the factory, Tom felt safer than he had in days. Later, Jasper lit a small fire in a metal barrel, carefully feeding it with bits of broken wood. The flames danced, casting flickering shadows across the floor. Charlie lay closer to it, and for the first time that day, Tom saw the tension ease from his dog's shoulders. They didn't speak much more that night. Just shared warmth, shared space, and shared silence. Sometimes that was all you needed. Thos. Next morning, the storm had passed, but the world outside was buried. Over a foot of snow coated the ground, and the streets were eerily quiet. Tom stood at the door, blinking into the pale light. Everything looked frozen, suspended in time. He wasn't sure what to do next. Then Jasper came up behind him. There's a church on 12th, he said. They hand out coats and canned food on Sundays. That's tomorrow. If you stick around, we can go together. Tom looked at him. The man was rough, weathered, but not cruel. And in this life, that counted for a lot. All right, Tom said. We'll go. Jasper nodded and retreated inside. Tom looked down at Charlie, who wagged his tail. You ready for another day, boy? Charlie barked once, a soft sound but strong. They turned back toward the warmth of the fire, 2 men and a dog in the heart of winter, holding on, and for now, that was enough. The factory creaked in the morning wind, beams moaning under the weight of fresh snow as faint gray light filtered in through broken windows. Tom stirred under his blanket, still groggy from sleep, and reached over to touch the soft fur beside him. Charlie was awake, his head resting on his paws, eyes alert but calm. The dog's breath puffed gently into the cold air as he looked up at Tom and gave his tail a single thump of recognition. Tom sat up slowly, joints stiff, and looked across the space. Jasper was already awake, sitting near the smoldering remains of the barrel fire. He had taken off his coat and was holding it over the smoke, trying to dry the inside lining. Morning, Jasper said without looking up. Morning, Tom replied, running a hand through his messy beard. Outside, the storm had passed, but it left behind a world sealed in white. Through the broken windows, Tom could see that the snow reached knee-high in some places. Cars were buried, streets empty, and the sky was a pale, wintry blue that made everything feel colder than it was. Jasper finally looked up. You still want to head to that church on 12th? Tom nodded. If there's food or coats, yeah. I don't have much of a choice. Jasper grunted. Didn't think you'd back out. You don't strike me as the quitter type. Tom raised an eyebrow. You get all that from a night in a freezing warehouse? No, Jasper said with a wry smile. I got that from your dog. He only sticks with someone who's worth it. Tom glanced at Charlie, who was now standing and stretching, letting out a soft yawn. His body language said he was ready to move, tail up, ears alert. Tom stood up, pulled on his boots, and adjusted the tarp-turned cloak around his shoulders. They gathered their things, blanket, tarp, an old soda bottle filled with melted snow, and stepped into the blinding morning. The first breath of outside air made Tom cough. It was frigid, sharp, the kind of cold that sliced into your lungs, and stayed there like broken glass. But at least it wasn't snowing. The trek began slowly. Every step required effort, lifting their legs high over snowbanks and searching for plowed paths or even just sidewalk edges. Charlie took the lead, navigating around obstacles and stopping occasionally to sniff or check on Tom. The streets looked apocalyptic. Cars left abandoned, trees bent under the weight of snow. Not a soul in sight. It was too early for most people, and those who were awake had better places to be. They had warm beds, kitchens, and jackets with zippers that still worked. They didn't have to walk through a frozen city to beg for mercy. Jasper kept pace surprisingly well for a man his age. His gait was steady, and he moved with a rhythm born from years of walking with nowhere to go. They passed a frozen fountain, its basin now, a bowl of jagged ice and snow. Tom glanced at it and muttered, "Used to bring my daughter here." Jasper didn't ask for details. He simply nodded. After another half-hour, they paused near a bus stop bench, half buried in a drift. Tom pulled out the last of their bagel pieces and handed half to Jasper. He broke the rest for Charlie, who ate it gently from his hand. "You ever think," Jasper said between bites, "about how none of this is really our fault?" Tom looked at him. "What do you mean?" "This, being out here. Freezing, starving. People drive by in warm cars, won't even look at you. But they act like it's our fault, like we chose this." Tom was quiet for a moment, then said, "Some of them think if they look at us, they'll see how close they are to ending up here too." Jasper gave a low chuckle. "Ain't that the truth?" They resumed their walk. Every block seemed longer. Now the cold biting harder, the wind picking up. Charlie started to limp slightly. His paw pads were raw from the ice. Tom noticed immediately and scooped the dog up, wrapping him in the tarp and holding him like a child. "You're carrying him?" Jasper asked, surprised. "He'd carry me if I needed it," Tom replied, matter of fact. Jasper didn't argue. By the time they reached 10th Avenue, the city began to stir. A snowplow groaned its way down a side street, clearing a narrow path. Smoke puffed from chimneys and building vents. Life, somewhere behind windows, was beginning again. And then came the worst stretch. Main Street, wider, windier, and completely exposed. Tom pulled his coat tighter and leaned into the gusts. Snow whipped across the street like shards of glass. Every few steps he had to stop and catch his breath, arms tight around Charlie, who now whimpered from the cold. Jasper stumbled once, falling to one knee. Tom turned to help him up. "You okay?" "Just caught a patch of ice," Jasper grunted, brushing snow from his coat. "Let's keep going." The church on 12th was still 2 blocks away. They could see its steeple rising behind a line of half-buried houses. A single plume of smoke rose from its chimney. Hope. They pushed forward, step by step, painfully slow. When they finally reached the steps of the church, Tom felt like he had nothing left. His arms were numb, his legs burning, but they had made it. He knocked on the wooden door. Nothing. He knocked again, louder this time. Finally, the door opened and a woman in a puffy coat and scarf peered out. She blinked at them, then stepped back in surprise. "Oh, come in, quick. It's freezing!" They stumbled inside, letting the warmth hit them like a wave. Tom felt dizzy. His vision blurred slightly, and his knees nearly buckled. "Here, sit down," the woman said, guiding them to a bench. Inside the church's fellowship hall, volunteers bustled about, handing out cups of hot soup, blankets, and warm clothes, to a line of people who had arrived earlier. The place smelled of chili and coffee, and the sound of quiet gospel music floated from a speaker in the corner. Jasper eased onto a bench and leaned back, his face slack with exhaustion. Tom knelt beside Charlie, checking his paws. One was bleeding slightly. "Hang in there, buddy," he whispered. "We made it." One of the volunteers, a young man with a beard and tired eyes, approached with a box of medical supplies. "I can help with your dog's paw. I've done this before." Tom nodded gratefully and stepped aside as the man knelt down, gently cleaning and bandaging the injury. "Strong pup," the man said. "What's his name?" "Charlie. Charlie's a hero. We had a guy last week, lost 2 toes to frostbite. You made it just in time." Tom looked around. Blankets, food, safety, warmth. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to breathe. They were safe, for now. The next few hours passed in a haze of rest and hot soup. Charlie curled under Tom's legs, sleeping deeply. Jasper dozed off with a blanket over his shoulders. The volunteers continued working, quietly helping one soul after another. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't home. But it was mercy. As night fell, Tom stood and walked to the church's large stained-glass window. Snow still fell outside, but now it looked gentle, almost peaceful. A woman approached, an older volunteer with silver hair and a calm face. "We're letting people sleep here tonight," she said. "You and your friend are welcome to stay." "Thank you," Tom said softly. She nodded, then looked at Charlie. "He's loyal. You're lucky." Tom looked down at his sleeping companion. "No," he said quietly. "We're both lucky." The hum of electric heaters buzzed faintly through the church basement, mingling with the soft rustle of blankets and the rhythmic breathing of a dozen sleeping souls. A few flickering fluorescent lights remained on, casting a pale yellow glow over the worn linoleum floor and mismatched sleeping bags laid out like a patchwork quilt. Tom lay awake, eyes on the ceiling. Charlie, curled tightly against his chest, let out small, contented grunts in his sleep, his warm body pressed into Tom's. For the first time in days, they were not surrounded by icy concrete or buffeted by a brutal wind. They had warmth, quiet, and the comfort of knowing someone had made space for them in the world. Tom should have felt peace, but the peace wouldn't settle. Memories stirred, echoes of another winter long ago. A hospital room, the sound of machines. His wife's voice on the phone, barely holding together as she told him their little girl was gone. A breath caught in his throat. He closed his eyes, pressing his cheek into Charlie's fur. The dog stirred but didn't move away. Just being close seemed to ground Tom, remind him that he wasn't alone in this world even if he had nothing else left. Outside, the city slumbered under a thick quilt of snow. The storm had passed, but the cold had deepened, a razor-sharp chill that cut through even the smallest crack in a window frame. He finally drifted off just before dawn. It was the sound that woke him. A shuffle, a whisper, the rustle of clothing. Tom's eyes flew open. Charlie was gone. He sat up instantly, heart pounding. His hand flew across the cold floor where Charlie had been only moments ago. Empty. Around him, people still slept. The room was dim, shadows dancing in corners. But near the back exit, the door was open just a crack, letting in a blade of frigid morning air. Tom was on his feet in seconds, his boots skidding across the linoleum as he rushed toward the exit. "Charlie!" he called, already pushing the door wide. A figure bolted into the alley beyond, dragging something in their arms. In the pale pre-dawn light, Tom saw the shape, Charlie, struggling against the grip of a man in a gray parka and torn jeans. "Hey!" Tom bellowed. "Put him down!" The figure didn't stop. Fueled by pure instinct and panic, Tom ran after him. Snow crunched beneath his boots as he burst into the alley, slipping slightly but regaining balance. The man had already turned the corner, sprinting toward the avenue. Tom's breath burned in his throat. His legs, already worn from days of cold, screamed with every step. But he didn't care. His dog, his only companion, the only living soul who still chose him every single day, was in danger. The thief had a lead, but not a large one. He was panicked, slipping and cursing as Charlie thrashed in his grip. Tom shouted again, louder. "Let him go!" Charlie gave a desperate bark, a high-pitched sound of fear and confusion. That bark hit Tom harder than any icy wind ever could. He rounded another corner just in time to see the man trip. Charlie scrambled free, landing hard in the snow and yelping. Tom didn't hesitate. He leapt over a trash bin, sprinted forward, and tackled the man into a drift. They hit the ground hard, snow exploding around them. "You stealing my dog?" Tom roared, fists clenched. The man grunted, struggling. He was younger than Tom, thinner, with sunken eyes and trembling hands. He smelled of stale liquor and desperation. I was just gonna sell him, the man gasped. Just wanted money. He's clean. People pay for clean dogs. Tom froze. The rage in his chest simmered to a deadly calm. You'd sell him. For what? $20? The man didn't answer. He tried to wriggle free. Tom shoved him down into the snow and growled, He's not property, he's family. Footsteps crunched behind them. Jasper, panting, wild-eyed, the old man stood there in his blanket and boots, holding a broken broom handle like a weapon. You all right? Jasper asked. Tom nodded slowly. Charlie? Charlie had already limped, over, brushing up against Tom's legs, whimpering. Tom stood and picked the dog up gently, checking him for bruises. Charlie shivered, but otherwise seemed unhurt. Tom held him close as Jasper kept the would-be thief in check with his makeshift staff. By the time they returned to the church, volunteers were awake and calling the police. The man, desperate and silent, sat on the steps until an officer picked him up. No resistance. No begging. Just a broken look in his eyes as he was led away. Tom didn't feel triumphant. He felt hollow. Later, a nurse from a nearby shelter treated Charlie's bruises. Nothing broken, thank God. Just some muscle strain and shock. The staff at the church insisted Tom and Charlie stay another night. Gave them their own cot, fresh blankets, hot food. Still, Tom couldn't eat much. He sat on the cot with Charlie in his lap, running his fingers through the dog's fur in slow, repetitive strokes. I should have watched you better, he whispered. I should have... I don't know. Charlie rested his chin on Tom's, arm blinking slowly. You saved him, Jasper said quietly, sitting on the edge of the cot beside them. And you didn't do it out of fear or pride. You did it because you love him. Tom swallowed hard. He's all I've got. Maybe, Jasper said, but I'd say he's all you need. For the next 2 days, they stayed at the church. Volunteers came and went, offering extra socks, warm meals, quiet prayers. One afternoon, the silver-haired volunteer who had first welcomed them sat beside Tom and handed him a folded paper. This is a voucher, she said, for a spot at the Magnolia Transitional Shelter. It's not permanent housing, but it's indoors, 2 meals a day. They take pets, already called ahead. Tom stared at the paper. This is real? He asked. It's real. Only a few beds open. But you've earned it. Tom didn't cry. He just nodded. That night he sat outside the church, staring at the sky. Stars glimmered above the city, cold but beautiful. Charlie leaned against his leg, nose in the wind. You think we can do it? Tom asked softly. Charlie looked up at him with calm, unwavering eyes. That was all the answer he needed. The streets looked different in the daylight, not just brighter but less threatening, less lonely. As Tom and Charlie stepped off the curb, walking toward the Magnolia Transitional Shelter, the morning sun split through the clouds in sharp, golden shafts. For the first time in months, the cold on Tom's cheeks didn't sting. It reminded him he was alive. Charlie walked beside him in a fresh red coat, one of the volunteers' last-minute gifts. He strutted, head high, tail gently swaying behind him, as if he knew this walk was something important. Monumental. Tom clutched the small folder under his arm. Inside was the voucher, his new ID, and a clean copy of a temporary intake form. The kind of paper people usually throw away without a second thought. But for Tom, they were keys, doors creaking open that had once been locked tight. The shelter came into view around the corner, a 3-story brick building with a small courtyard, and a painted sign out front, Magnolia House Transitional Living. It didn't look like much, peeling paint, a crooked gutter, but the warm steam puffing out of the side vents, The open door and the group of residents smoking and laughing on the stoop made it feel more like home than any place Tom had seen in years. He hesitated. Charlie stopped too, glancing up at him with a little chuff. Tom took a breath, then exhaled. "All right, boy. Let's go see what's inside." The receptionist, a young man named Leo with a calming voice and sleeves of colorful tattoos, welcomed them in. The lobby was clean and plain, filled with plastic chairs and bulletin boards pinned with job postings, food pantry dates, and flyers for group therapy sessions. "You must be Tom," Leo said, extending a hand. "And this must be Charlie." Tom shook his hand. Charlie sniffed Leo's palm and gave it a small lick. "We've been expecting you," Leo said. "Come on back. Let's get you settled." They were given a small private room, nothing fancy but enough. A single bed with a decent mattress, a desk, a wardrobe, and a thick pad and food bowls already waiting for Charlie in the corner. Tom sat on the bed slowly, eyes taking in the space. "You all right?" Leo asked. Tom nodded. "Yeah. It's just been a while since I had a door." Charlie sniffed around the room, then curled up on the pad with a long sigh. Leo smiled. "You two are going to do great here. I can feel it." 1 week later, Tom stood in front of the community kitchen stove, flipping pancakes for the early breakfast shift. He wore a clean apron over borrowed clothes and had shaved for the first time in months. His reflection in the small window above the sink surprised him daily. He was starting to look human again. Charlie sat behind him, patiently waiting for a scrap. The other residents trickled in, young men with weathered eyes, older women with suitcases, and everyone in between. Some smiled, some didn't, but nearly all of them stopped to greet Charlie. He had quickly become the unofficial therapy dog of Magnolia House. People who never spoke started petting him. People who never smiled began to grin. And Tom, for the first time, began to feel useful again. After breakfast, he and Charlie walked to the local library. There was a job board there, and Tom spent an hour each morning applying to whatever he could. Warehouse work, janitorial gigs, night security. He didn't mind starting from the bottom. He just needed to start. Charlie waited patiently, lying beside the computer desk. Every now and then, someone would ask if he was a service dog. Tom would smile and say, "No, he's more than that." Back at the shelter, he met with a case manager every other day. Her name was Keisha, and she was warm, sharp, and didn't take excuses. She helped him register for a small stipend, sign up for medical checkups, and apply for low-income housing once his transitional period was over. "You've got everything it takes," she told him. "You just needed a chance. That dog of yours, he's the reason you made it here." Tom didn't argue. 1 month later, he got the job. The warehouse offered graveyard shifts, nothing glamorous, but it paid, and it was steady. The manager was a gruff woman named Alma who asked if he could handle physical labor in the cold. "I've handled worse," Tom replied with a tired grin. Charlie couldn't go to work with him, but the shelter had a rotation of volunteers who walked him during Tom's shifts. At first, Tom hated leaving him behind, but slowly he started to trust again. To believe the world might not take everything from him. Each night before heading out, he sat on the edge of the bed and rubbed Charlie's ears. "I'll be back soon," he'd whisper. "We're not done yet." Charlie would lick his cheek, tail thumping. The weeks passed in a rhythm: work, home, rest. Tom started saving money, buying Charlie better food. He even found an old coat at the thrift shop that actually fit. One snowy evening, he returned to the shelter to find a letter waiting for him. Keisha stood at the front desk, beaming. "You got it," she said. He stared at the envelope in his hands. The city had approved his application for a subsidized studio apartment in a safe neighborhood. Not fancy, not big, but permanent. His name on a lease. His own key. His hands trembled as he opened the letter. Charlie barked once, sensing the shift in energy. A few of the other residents clapped. Jasper, now a familiar face in the shelter, nodded at him from the corner of the room. Tom knelt beside Charlie and whispered, "We did it." "Move in." Tom unlocked the door to the studio with trembling hands. The apartment was tiny, a single room with a small kitchenette, a bathroom, and windows that overlooked the park. But it was theirs. Charlie bounded inside, circling the room, sniffing everything. Tom set down the thrift store blanket on the floor, then sat on the edge of the bed and let himself cry, not out of sadness, out of sheer, overwhelming gratitude. A knock came at the door a few hours later. It was Jasper, holding a houseplant. "The windowsill," he said. "Makes the place feel alive." Tom took it with a smile. "Thanks. For everything." "You're the one who did the hard part," Jasper said. "You stayed kind, even when the world wasn't." As the sun dipped low outside the window, Tom fixed 2 mugs of coffee, one for himself, one for Jasper, and fed Charlie a bowl of the best kibble he could afford. Then he sat down, pulled the dog close, and looked around the room. He had nothing when the winter began. Not a roof, not a dollar, just a dog with kind eyes and the quiet promise that they'd make it through together. And somehow, they had. The end.